Okay. And you can hear me okay, Maria?
Yes, we can, Chris. Thank you so much.
Fine. I don't have a fancy mic.
So I can hear you well. It is so nice to see you again after around 10 years. Those who are joining us now.
Please don't say it's as long as 10 years.
Yeah, well, I did my master's at UCAN, where Chris Jones was heading the department back then, and he was my supervisor there as well. So I'm happy to have him here, but he has joined University of Liverpool now. And without further ado, Chris, floor is all yours. I would like to introduce yourself to our participants, and we can move on from there. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. I'm sorry, I'm just checking my timer so I don't go over time. Yeah.
No worries, I'm keeping record of that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Maria. So yeah, as Maria said, I currently work in the Department of English at the University of Liverpool, where I've been for the last 7 years. If you are on Twitter, or strangely named X these days, that's my Twitter there. If you're interested in that, that's not a personal thing. I tweet about research things there. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about digital literacy and taking a corpus-informed approach to that. So the aims really today are to discuss a few common features of e-language, electronic language. We don't really have another name for the language which is used online and on social media, etc. I suppose we could call it D-language for digital language, but nobody seems to have done so yet. So I will stick with e-language. And I'm also going to discuss some common characteristics, particularly of instant messaging and its linguistic features. And to discuss at the end some possible implications for teaching and learning from this. Okay, so a couple of definitions. Literacy we can define in this way, and this is from the National Literacy Trust in the UK. It can be defined as the ability to read, write, speak, and listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world. Often we think of literacy as only about reading and writing, but of course it does include speaking and listening as well. Digital literacy can be defined as having the skills you need to live, learn, and work in a society where communication and access to information is increasingly through digital technologies, such as the internet, social media, etc. Okay, why am I interested in this? Well, my position is that for L2 learners, a key factor in any kind of digital literacy is an awareness of common forms of language used in online communication, and some understanding of how this discourse works, because it's likely to be different from other forms of language. And for us as teachers or researchers, we can understand this common language, these common forms better if we explore forms and functions of e-language in corpora. It is possible to make some generalizations about e-language, and Knight et al. Did this in 2014, so 10 years ago, when they looked at a corpus of tweets, SMS, messages, and emails. They looked at about 1 million words in their CANELP corpus, and they came up with a few generalizations that could be made about these forms of e-language. Excuse me. They suggested that in this kind of language, the focus is very much on the now, the here and now, and the immediate future, or the immediate past. So we tend to see forms such as this morning, today, tomorrow, much more frequently than, for example, 10 years ago. Focus is also on the speakers and the senders. So we see pronouns such as I and you, which are much higher frequency in their data. The focus is also on efficiency. So we see a lot of ellipsis. We see a lot of words and expressions and clauses left out when the context is clear. And each online form, as we know, develops its own features. X, for example, the kiss in emails and SMS, abbreviations such as LOL in SMS and instant messaging, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. There are lots of these. We can also say that generally e-language is multimodal. It is not, it exists in more than one channel. It might be text plus a picture, text plus a link to something, etc. So it's very often multimodal. Today, I want to focus very much on instant messaging, and I want to look at some instant messaging chats between friends and classmates, particularly. So informal, the kind of messaging chats that people would have with each other. And I'm going to use 21,000 words of WhatsApp chats between some Malaysian English speakers. And this was kindly provided by a previous student of ours, Nur Mohammed, who is from Malaysia, in 2019. And I've referenced her thesis, very interesting thesis at the end. So her thesis is very much interested in, excuse me, Malaysian English. I'm not focusing on that today, but I'm using the data to look at common forms and functions of English that are used in these chats. And along the way, I'm going to make a few comparisons to other corpora. So I'm going to look at conversations between friends and family from the spoken British National Corpus, and that's 11 million words of informal conversations between friends and family. I'm going to look at the English Web 2021, which is 52 billion words of internet data from news websites, blogs, etc. And I'm going to look at a little bit of Twitter data from a public health information corpus of about 500,000 words. So these last three, I'm not going to look at them in detail. I'm just going to use them to make a few brief comparisons. I'm particularly interested in how WhatsApp is similar or different to conversations. And when I say conversations, I'm talking, of course, about face-to-face conversations. Why do I want to look at instant messaging, such as WhatsApp? Well, you might want to consider how many WhatsApp or similar app messages you send yourself per day or receive per day. An estimate in 2021 suggests that WhatsApp alone has 100 billion messages sent across the globe per day. So that's likely to be something that, of course, students will use in L1 and maybe the L2 already. And that's a point I made in an article with Ziad Al-Malki in 2022. And we need to understand crossovers and distinctions from spoken language and also from other forms of e-language. How is it different in WhatsApp instant messaging from other forms of digital communication? The reason also is because instant messaging is, of course, an important tool for digital literacy. It helps, and it can help, I think, learners to develop interaction with each other and with friends. Okay, so some general differences then. WhatsApp and conversation. We can say that WhatsApp and conversation both will have interpersonal and transactional goals. People might be just trying to get information to have a transactional goal, but they also might be trying to maintain friendships or to develop friendships, and that could be an interpersonal goal. Very often those goals will merge, and we'll see some examples of that in a minute. A form like WhatsApp is inherently multimodal. People send text, of course, but they also send pictures, they also send links, they also send video, they also send GIFs. Face-to-face conversation can be multimodal. We can, of course, talk to people and show them things on our phone, etc. But it's not, I don't think, as inherently multimodal. Both are often focused on the here and now. Face-to-face conversation, of course, has body language and intonation, whereas WhatsApp does not. Turn-taking is signaled by the end of the message in WhatsApp, and in conversation, it's signaled by social norms, such as falling intonation tends to signal that somebody's finished their turn. Overlap, particularly when we look at multi-party group chats in WhatsApp, can cause confusion, and you may have experienced this yourself. It's sometimes hard to understand or to be clear what turn somebody is responding to, particularly when the turns kind of go out of sequence, as can happen. In conversation, face-to-face conversation, overlap is normal. One person speaks before the other person's finished or in response to the other person, but it's generally understood because, again, it's generally socially signaled. And the last thing we can say in general is that WhatsApp use, of course, things like emoji to signal stance, emotion, listenership, whereas in face-to-face conversation, listenership comes via, of course, body language, but also response tokens. People say things like, yeah, that's right, that's interesting, etc. Okay, so those are some general differences. Let's look at a couple of examples, and then we'll look at some more specifics and get into the language a little bit. Okay, so here is one example from Mohammed's data. So again, these are Malaysian students using English and sometimes Malaysian English with each other. And these chats, I should know, are only between two people. There are no group chats in here. Okay, so here's the first one. I just saw you in the admin cafe. Haha. Hey, hey, hey. Sorry, where were you? Lol. I was at the table near the door. You were leaving anyways. Haha. Yeah. Assignment. You have class in admin? Yeah. Ethnic at 1. Saw X though. X, by the way, here is not a comment or relation to the new Twitter. X is a name of someone which has been anonymized. Saw X though. He saw me too. We exchanged sticking out our tongues out from across the room. Ha ha ha. So here we can see there is very much an interpersonal goal here. This is about maintaining the friendship, exchanging news with each other, just having a chat. So the main goal here is interpersonal. It's very much about the here and now. There is clear turn taking. There is response with haha, etc. and lol. And in the next example, we can see some similar things. X, again, that's somebody's name. Need a favor. Are you free now? Hey, sup, X. Well, what happened? I mean, let's see if I can help. But I'm not that free right now. Ha ha ha, it's okay. Y, X, and then some Malaysian and an emoji. Ha ha ha, nothing. Oh, okay, if you say so. Again, here we have, this is a more transactional goal. The person here wants to get some help from the other student about presumably an assignment or something similar, but it's also very much about the here and now. And there is some obvious evidence of responding and interacting with each other, which converges into a kind of interpersonal goal as well. We see the use of emoji, and again, we see the use of response with ha ha ha. So a few more observations from that kind of data. Ellipsis is very common. Example, you have class in admin. There are many other examples here of ellipsis. There are abbreviations, lol, for example. There are what is called, I thought very nicely, written laughter particles. So things like ha ha and ha ha ha. That signals laughter, but of course it's written down. There are emoji, of course. There is use of what we might call I-dialect. So this mimics connected speech, but it's written. So you notice the use of "it's okay" to mean it's okay. So it's a kind of I-dialect. There is very selective use of punctuation. There is punctuation here, but it's not used consistently. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. There is, of course, code switching because these speakers are Malaysian English speakers, and they do switch sometimes to Malaysian, sometimes to what we recognize as English. And in general, we can say that the communicative efficiency and competence of the message is much greater here than absolute accuracy. And that's in itself quite interesting. That's a point I'll come back to a little bit later. Okay, when we look at all of this data and we look at the most frequent words, there are also some interesting observations we can make. We see, of course, particular words and formulaic sequences being used. Of course, you is very frequent, as is I, and discourse marking such as I mean, etc. When we look at the most frequent words, we can find lots of crossover with conversations, but also some differences and distinctions. So these are the 20 most frequent words from the WhatsApp data. And we can see here the high frequency of I and you, but also the abbreviated you, also it and that, also the verb go, the adverb just, and of course the ha, which signals listenership very often, or some kind of response. When we compare this to the spoken British National Corpus most frequent words, there are many crossovers and similarities. We see it being highly frequent. We see you being highly frequent. We see that being highly frequent. But we also see some differences. Yeah is highly frequent in the spoken British National Corpus because, of course, it's a token which is used in response to other people when we're talking face-to-face. It's not something we can do via WhatsApp. Hence, we get different types of expressions used for listenership. We also have greater frequency of a word at number 11, like. Why is that? Do speakers say, tell each other all the time that they like things, what they like and they don't like? Well, yes, they do partly, but it's also a discourse marker to mark a pause or to highlight something which is coming next. And it's also a token which is used to report speech. And he was like, and she was like, etc. We also see the high frequency of the verb do here. If we compare to the Web 2021, we see some differences. Again, we've got that as highly frequent and also this, but there are some differences. I and you, while frequent, are not as high up the numbers of frequency. And we see a word like and being much higher frequency here. Okay, so some differences and crossovers here. In the WhatsApp data and conversation data, we have high frequency of I and you. People are texting and talking about themselves and the immediate conversation. We also see high frequency of delexicalized verbs such as go and do. And we'll come back to this in a moment. In WhatsApp and conversations and the web, we see high frequency items such as it and that. In the WhatsApp data, we have laughter particles, ha, ha, ha. We have abbreviations such as you, and we have a higher frequency of just. In conversations, we have a higher frequency of like and yeah. Okay, so why are these words so frequent? Well, that is an interesting word. It's high frequency, as we would expect in most corpora. And we know it's important for cohesion generally. But in conversation and in instant messaging, it's very important for responding, explaining, and linking turns. So in the instant messaging data, for example, the WhatsApp data, some of the common collocations are, that's why, that's good, that's interesting. So the WhatsAppers, if you like, are responding to each other and they're linking what they're saying to turns which have come previously. So it's important for responding, explaining, linking turns, and also creating a kind of cohesion. Okay, and I think sometimes that words such as that and it get forgotten about in terms of their importance. They're taught very early. Most students will be aware of them, but are they actually aware of some of the ways that they function in conversation and in instant messaging to respond, to explain, to link? I'm not sure. Laughter particles are interesting because of they don't feature in face-to-face conversation. They seem to act in this WhatsApp data as a kind of response token, as I've mentioned, and they have a kind of interpersonal but textual function. They're textual in the sense that they are showing a response. I am understanding your turn, I am responding to it, but they are also interpersonal. I am suggesting what you're saying is interesting, enjoyable, etc. And then hence, of course, please continue. Go and of course do are interesting because they're used very often to talk about the here and now. And the collocations that we find in the instant messaging data are things like go back, go out, go to, go for, go eat. Those are the common things because the speakers are talking about things that they are about to do, have done just before the conversation, etc. Just is interesting. We know that just is a frequent word in spoken English. In the instant messaging data, at least in this data, it's used very much as a time marker. Just now is the most common collocate. And it's also used sometimes to just indicate simply. For example, it's well, when the speakers are talking about, for example, an assignment, they might say it's just like something or just like that. So they mean to mean simply. In conversations, in the conversation data, it's used as a time marker, of course, and it's used to indicate to mean simply. But it's also used as a softener. Can you just help me with this? Can I just check, etc. Seems to be used a little bit less like that in this WhatsApp data. Okay. If we move on to looking at the chunks in corpus terms, these are called n-grams. So if we search for the full word chunks here, in the in the WhatsApp data, we find there is a limited amount of data here, so there's not a massive amount of chunks. We can see that I don't know and at the end of are very frequent. If we look at the spoken British national corpus, we find some similarity. I don't know is the most common full word chunk, followed by I don't think, but we also have and I was like. And that chunk, and I was like, is used to indicate very much and to report speech. And I was like this, and I was like that, and he was like that, etc. Okay, so there are some crossovers here. If we compare to the Web 2021, we see a great difference, although there is one similarity, as you can see. So in the web data, which is billions of words of websites, blogs, etc., we get very different chunks being high frequency. In the United States, at the University of is one of the, as well as the, etc. But we also can see at the end of is highly frequent in this data as well. So this kind of shows us that, again, as I mentioned, it's impossible to talk about one kind of unifying E language. There are differences and distinctions in different modes of E language. The web is very different, as we can guess from WhatsApp. WhatsApp has, as I've pointed out so far, lots of similarities with spoken English, but also some differences as well. And if we look at some Twitter public health tweet data, just as a comparison, so this is data from public health messages about COVID-19 from 2021 in the UK. We can see again, very, very different forward chunks here. Spread of the virus, stop the spread of, ask your pharmacist, or etc. So I'm not suggesting that this data is important for EFL learners or anything like that. I'm just trying to suggest that there are large differences between the kind of chunks we'll find in WhatsApp if we compare to the web And if we compare to an example like this from Twitter, so it's impossible to talk about one whole e-language. The chunks in the WhatsApp and conversation data are interesting. I don't know, for example, is, as I've noted, highly frequent. Sometimes, and particularly in the WhatsApp data, it seems to be used genuinely by speakers when they want to indicate that they don't know. But we also do know that I don't know is used very often, in spoken language at least, to buy time. Speakers will say, what's the answer? I don't know. Think about it and then give an answer. It's also used as a type of hedging. It's used to make the speaker's answers sound less direct. There's a stereotype about British people that someone will ask what time is something and they'll say, I don't know, 7. They know the time, but they don't want to say it too directly. At the end of, obviously collocates very commonly with at the end of the day. And in the WhatsApp data, it tends to be used as a time marker. But we also know that in spoken data, it has an idiomatic and discourse marking use. It signals that a summary of my views is coming after I've said at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's too expensive. At the end of the day, it's a good idea. So it kind of signals and marks that a little summary is coming. So common language, such as I don't know, such as at the end of the day, in WhatsApp and also in conversations, has interpersonal. We hedge because we don't want to sound too direct. We don't want to force our opinions onto the other person. And it also has textual functions. For example, at the end of the day, can mark the discourse and signal to the other listener, to the other person, that a summary of our view is coming next. And it also has ideational functions. So in other words, it stands for ideas. So I don't know, of course, can be a genuine expression that we don't know something. So here are a couple of examples in context from the WhatsApp data. Here the speakers are talking about some Japanese that they've been learning. And the first speaker says, it is spoken, haha. You know, I learned the meaning of nara and ba through this sentence. I like this meaningful quote. Plus now find my new way to learn new words from Japanese. The bar is if then, but it is placed at the end of the sentence. Feels like Chinese. By the way, there is bar in Malay too, right? Haha, yes, there is, but an accent, etc., etc. So here we can see at the end of being used, not actually as a time marker, but as a place marker, but being used literally rather than any kind of discourse marking function. In this last example, the speakers are talking about something different, talking about somebody's mum. My mum asked me about you last night. Ha ha ha. Yeah, she knows you and she remembers you. Oh, so what makes her remember me? They use some Malay here. So embarrassed, I know, but some of that civilization, but just in general, quite a lot. Ha ha. I don't know either, but I don't think I did mention that directly. Maybe she stalked me on my phone and she read our conversation. It's okay. Mums are like that. Strange and interesting view of mothers stalking people on their phones. Anyway, here we can see the use of I don't know is, of course, I think a genuine use of I don't know rather than some kind of hedging or interpersonal use. Okay, so some implications for teaching to finish.
Hi, Dr. Press. Just 5 minutes more. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Thank you very much. So some implications for teaching then. I think the first thing is that if we want students to become more digitally literate at using instant messaging, such as WhatsApp, the obvious thing is that they need exposure to them in English. So they need exposure to examples of multimodal instant messaging texts in English. So I'm not sure how often this kind of thing appears in textbooks these days. I have seen examples of SMS messages, but I think they need examples, perhaps teacher-produced examples or edited examples from real examples um, to be exposed to read. They're not going to get better at this kind of thing if they don't have examples of them to look at. Then I think it's important to develop language awareness of key features such as ellipsis, common chunks, emoji, abbreviations, common words and collocations, use of I dialect such as soke, and of course laughter particles such as ha 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 ha. It doesn't mean, of course, that students need to learn all of these things all at once. It doesn't mean that we have to teach them or need to teach students to use emoji, or because emoji are a choice. Not everybody uses them. Which ones we choose to use are an individual thing. But I'm talking about developing their awareness of them. For example, looking at them in text, finding them, underlining them, discussing what they mean, discussing how they function. And I think it's also important to develop language awareness of crossovers and differences with conversation. There are similarities between things like WhatsApp and face-to-face conversation, but there are differences, and there are particular stylistic things which we can highlight for learners. I think if we want students to practice this language, we can do so via communicative activities, but if it's feasible, by actually using instant messaging and getting them to do the practice using instant messaging. So a common thing to do is to ask students to arrange to meet outside of class. Traditionally, they might use a diary. They have different information on their diary. They're trying to arrange it to meet next week. There's no reason why they can't do a similar activity by using WhatsApp or similar. Sounds like I'm advertising WhatsApp. I'm not. There are other instant messaging formats available. And the last thing I think is that in terms of feedback, standards may need to be different here if we want to give feedback on students when they're using things like WhatsApp. Efficiency and speed of communication and mutual understanding is much more important here than absolute accuracy. You could see that in some of the examples there from those Malaysian learners. And I think that's important. I think demanding a kind of standard of accuracy, which is just not used in this format, is unrealistic and not helpful. And just a quick word on ellipsis. It is definitely possible to develop students' language awareness of something like ellipsis. And a study I did with my colleague Jane Cleary in 2019 did precisely that. We didn't make students produce elliptic language, but we did show that instruction could help to develop their awareness of that. Okay, that's everything I have to say. I'm happy to take questions, but the references are all at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. We are ready to take all the questions we have now. Okay, we have someone saying, how could participants in conversation identify/discriminate if I don't know is used generally or for hedging purposes?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Again, that's part of language awareness. So I think if we look at expressions such as I don't know, in context, we can understand very often how they're being used. Are they being used to genuinely say, I don't know? or are they being used for another purpose? And the context around what is said will usually give us that indication. Of course, in face-to-face conversation, we have, as I've mentioned, body language, intonation, etc. And we don't have that in WhatsApp. But usually if we look at language in context, and that's why it's important to, as I said, to give exposure to students if they want to, and presumably they probably do need to learn this kind of language. We can look at things in context, and the context can help.
Great. We have another question there, Chris, for you.
Yeah.
So can't the written laughter participles are similar examples we see as a use of intonation in digital exchanges?
Yes. Are they similar to intonation? I don't know if they are. I mean, when you look in most spoken corpora, the word laughs, which is not what somebody's saying, but what somebody's doing, is usually highly frequent. So speakers do laugh very often, not surprisingly. And but it's interesting to think of how often they laugh in textbooks. Almost never. I think it's more of a signal of listenership and response. So I'm showing the other person, I'm responding to them, I'm showing that I'm listening to them, and I'm encouraging them to continue all at the same time. So it's a kind of mark of listenership. And of course, it has an interpersonal function as well, because I'm showing that I find what the other person is saying probably, interesting, amusing, etc. And I'm enjoying the conversation. So it's mainly a form of response, I think.
Great, thank you. One more question. If I want to teach WhatsApp language, how do or where do I get the model besides using your own text messages?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one because coming into this talk, I was there doesn't exist at the moment, as far as I know, a large scale corpus of WhatsApp or similar messages which have been anonymized for use. The spoken British National Corpus is open access, and that can be accessed with all the transcripts, etc. I think, yeah, probably it's better, or the simplest thing is probably to, with permission of the other person, or people, to use your own, but of course to only use ones which everybody's happy to use, and also to anonymize people, places as much as possible until a corpus appears. Watch this space for that one.
Great, thank you. Right, so you can communicate directly by opening your mic with Dr. Jones if you wish to at the moment, or you can continue to use the chat box. We have Q&A session for another 5 minutes. It was very enlightening, Dr. Jones, and I am doing my PhD in corpus linguistics this time, so it was a good talk for me.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay, if we don't have any questions, we will stop here. Yes, this session was recorded and you all will receive the recording. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel where all the recordings will be uploaded in 72 hours or so. Right, so if you would like to share your email, if attendees would like to contact you or have further questions, if you don't mind, if you could share your email in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm just typing it in now.
Thank
Maria.
you so much. Great. I think there are no more questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris Jones, for joining us today. It was very enlightening, very good use of understanding corpus linguistics and the whole theory around it. Thank you once again.
No problem. Thanks, thanks everybody. And
Bye
yeah,
for now.
I've shared my email. I think I've shared it with everybody. I'm not sure, but if not, I can send it on to you, Maria, and you're very welcome to share it.
Sure, sure. So I can send his email with your
Oh,
certificates.
okay.
No,
I've just sorry, just a moment. I've sent
yeah,
it
sure.
directly to Dan. I don't know why I've done that. That's a strange.
No worries.